We live in a broken world where sin is rife. And although we trust that there's no abuse happening in our midst, we can't guarantee that. We don't know the background of every child and teenager coming through our doors, and therefore also don't know what is happening in their homes and schools. But we want to create a safe environment for them, and we want them to feel safe so that they can be relaxed and happy. When a child is safe, it means that they aren't the victim of harm, that they are with people that they trust and that they know what's happening around them. So when we say we want to protect them, we are saying that we'll do what we can to prevent injury, kidnapping, bullying, abuse, or any other physical or emotional harm that we have control over. So let's first chat about being above reproach.
Our decisions and actions send messages out to people around us, and those messages aren't always interpreted in the way you would expect or want them to be. In the sin-filled world that we live in, we need to make sure that there is no hint of sin in our lives, particularly sexual sin. What that means practically in the kids' ministry context is making sure that none of our interactions with kids can be misinterpreted as sexual offense, either by them or by onlookers. Avoid being in a situation where you're alone with a child. Always have another leader with you, even if it's just as a witness. This does make bathroom trips a bit more complicated, so strategize with your co-leaders to ensure that you are going in groups. That also means that it's best to have more than one leader in each age group. If your group only has one leader at the moment, speak to your congregation coordinator so that you can try and add more people to the team as soon as possible. If you need to make contact with children outside of meetings, always include parents in the communication and avoid over-friendly language. Keep it as factual as possible. If you're going to meet up with a child or teen outside of the official meeting time, make sure that parents are aware and okay with it. The best would be to have the parents' written consent in a message. As a safety net, we ask that you make sure that you have completed certain legal documents. This ensures that we have no legal reason to prevent you from leading our kids, and can also protect you should there be any claims made about your conduct. Now let's talk specifically about physical touch. Touch is an important part of connection, but it can become destructive. While you don't need to go to the extreme end of avoiding all physical contact, be aware of your conduct. Remain above reproach by staying in full view of others and being aware of any children that become particularly clingy. It's helpful to think through specific guidelines of what is okay and what's not okay. Bear in mind the guidelines differ based on the child's age. We've given some more specific guidelines in your books. Why don't you pause here and check them out and jot down any other touch-related scenarios that you might be unsure of. If you realize that a child is giving you more physical contact than what is appropriate, look for a sensitive and early opportunity to end the contact. For older kids, maintain stricter boundaries, only using a reassuring hand on a shoulder every now and then. You might also need to use physical contact to prevent injury if necessary. As leaders, let's help each other out in this. If you notice another leader's actions that might be misinterpreted by children or other onlookers, gently chat to them about it or flag it with your team coordinator. You could even invite the perspective of the rest of your team by asking them how they think you're doing in this area. On a similar note, let's be aware of any inappropriate behavior between the kids. If you notice anything worrying, speak to the child or your team coordinator so that they can talk to the child. The next area to consider is media. There's so much that can be said about media, such as the use of photos, the use of social media, and choosing safe multimedia to show the kids. We've explained each of these in a bit more detail in the books, but let's get straight to the policies for protecting leaders and children.
One of the first ways that we can protect the kids in our own kids ministry is by screening the leaders as they join the team. We would check in with their community leaders about whether they've done the church members course, whether they're an active member of the community, and whether they are living an open and accountable life, having found victory over sinful patterns of behavior. These questions for community leaders are the first safeguard in the process of bringing people onto team. The next phase is the documentation. Depending on the specific government requirements, your documentation policy may vary, but you may be asked to complete an affidavit and a Form 30, submitted to the Department of Social Development. Many churches would also require full police clearance or fingerprint clearance as a record that no one serving has a criminal record. Chat to your coordinator if you're not sure what is expected of you. Through your time as a kids ministry leader, you might end up being someone that a child may confide in about sensitive information, such as abuse, suicidal thoughts or tendencies, or other trauma. This may even be because they haven't felt confident or comfortable sharing this with anyone else. So, if they open up to you about this, recognize that they are vulnerable and treat them with warmth and compassion. But remember the weightiness of the situation and your responsibility in it. And remember that anything you do in response to a situation like this should always be above reproach. In the books, we've given a list of the types of things a child might speak to you about, as well as how to identify these things if they aren't verbally communicated. While each child and situation is so different and should be treated on a case-by-case basis, there are certain principles that can apply to all situations. We found the acronym TRAMS helpful to remember in the situations. Take it seriously. Reassure them that they've done the right thing in telling someone, but don't promise to keep it a secret. Tell them that there are good secrets, like birthday surprises, and bad secrets, like where someone is getting hurt. Ask questions to clarify the facts. Make notes straight after your discussion, and seek help. This is possibly one of the most challenging things that you could face as a leader, and many of you will never find yourselves in situations where you have to lead a child through this. But when it happens, we want you to be prepared and know how to lead the child to the necessary help. If you ever hear of any of these situations, the child is generally crying out for help, and you could play a major role in helping them. All these situations call for some form of counseling and guidance for the child. Speak to your leaders about who the best person would be to refer them to, and involve the parents where appropriate or necessary. If there is any form of emergency, injury, or disclosure of abuse, we are legally required to report it. Speak to your overseeing coordinator as soon as possible, and they will advise you on the next step. Having considered all of this, let's pray for our kids and the kids ministry team, knowing that God is sovereign and merciful, and He wants to show us His kind Father heart in all of these situations.